Why do so many Twi'leks ultimately become Sith? Greetings Acolytes and welcome back to the Archives. Within the galaxy, there are species which sometimes naturally have an affinity for either the light or the dark side, many times with species who ally with the dark. They find themselves in the ranks of the Sith, but this is not always the case, as there are certain species who don't innately have a draw to the dark side, or a more natural draw to the dark side if you will, and yet ultimately don the black robes. An example of one that is naturally drawn to the dark side though, is actually humans, as they are prone to greed, and their willingness to accept a broad spectrum of morality usually places them as the most common type of Sith Lord in all of the lore, but possibly the second most common species to frequent the Sith Order throughout history are the Twi'leks. The Twi'lek race has a variety of important positions within galactic history, with many making militaristic differences in the Republic, and especially within the Rebel Alliance. But for every Twi'lek fighting for freedom and democracy, there is definitely one of their race consumed by the dark side. In today's holocron, we are going to attempt to explain the phenomenon and why the Twi'leks vary so greatly in their moral allegiances, with the majority leading towards becoming Sith Lords. Why are there so many Twi'lek Sith in the lore? What about their species and how their species is treated in Star Wars draws them to the dark side? In the days of the Old Republic era, a Twi'lek Sith was a commonality, and we're not talking about just appearing in the background. We consistently see the Twi'lek rising through the ranks of the Sith Order and commanding high positions of authority. One of the first of them that we know of was a dark lady by the name of Darth Atrix, who led the Legion of Korriban during the campaign against the Eternal Empire. She was a red-skinned Twi'lek who looked similar to that of Darth Talon from the Legacy era. This dark lady would end up dying by the hand of Arcan, the son of the Eternal Emperor, during the attack of the Sith homeworld. During the end of the Old Republic era, there were two Twi'leks of high status within the Brotherhood of Darkness. The second in command to Lord Khan was a Twi'lek by the name of Lord Kopex. But next we want to explore one of our favorite Sith Lords, and if you would like a full video on him, please be sure to request it down below. But one of our favorites is the Blade Master Kas'im, the Sith Academy Blade Master, and for all intents and purposes, the first master of Darth Bane would be Kas'im. Kas'im's relationship with Bane that we see sets him down a dark path, and one that will lead Bane to the creation of the Rule of Two. Kas'im was extremely renowned as a great warrior during this era, and many speculated that he was the greatest fighter that the Sith had at that time. What's fascinating about Kas'im is he would actually die by Bane, and from a certain point of view, some may say that Kas'im was unwittingly the first participant in the Rule of Two, since he was killed by his apprentice, and the apprentice would go on to redefine the Sith. Even though Kas'im had no knowledge of the Rule of Two, he was integral to it. In the Bane trilogy, Darth Bane even considered Kas'im for the role of his apprentice, only to realize Kas'im was too loyal to the Brotherhood of Darkness. But within the ranks of the Rule of Two, we actually have two more Twi'lek Sith. We have the Sith Lady Darth Jean, the woman who would save the Sith Order from the madness of Darth Gravit, and the man who we at the Archives have nicknamed Darth Befall, the unnamed master of Darth Tenebris, who was also a Twi'lek. But the only real information we have on Darth Befall was Tenebris once called him a doddering old fool. Not really much to explore there as of right now, unfortunately. Something fascinating about Twi'lek Sith is they refuse to fall by the wayside. Status is extremely important in Twi'lek society, and this carries over. This is often represented physically by longer leku, or even being fatter as a symbol of wealth and prosperity. But Twi'leks in the Sith do not need physical symbols of prestige. Their power itself comes from the dark side, and the dark side gives them all the status needed. It were those on the upper echelon of Twi'lek society that got to make all the rules, and those that got to live free. This is where we begin to see the problems that stem from Ryloth, and how the Twi'lek people are treated in general, which leads them into a life of darkness. The Twi'leks are the most enslaved race in the entire galaxy. Their people, specifically the females of the species, are prized for their exotic beauty. They are believed to be graceful, beautiful creatures, especially due to their cultural dances. Because of this, the slave market of Ryloth is extremely oppressive. Twi'lek children are kidnapped all the time to be raised and sold as slaves. And the most wicked part of this is that the slave trade on Ryloth is apparently overlooked by the Republic despite being highly illegal. It's just too lucrative. Ryloth itself does not have any natural resources that can be traded to other systems. In fact, Ryloth's people are usually starving, and the entire planet is primitive and low-tech. The people that lived there literally had to sell their own to survive in the galaxy. The Twi'leks are considered a commodity among people like the Hutts, crime lords, and the elite gangsters. Those that manage to either free themselves or escape still won't find peace, as they usually turn to a life of crime. Since they are an unassuming people and usually associated with servitude, Twi'leks can slip in and out of places pretty easily and steal essentially whatever they want. Because they are so beautiful, they can also use these powers of seduction to their advantage. But whether as a slave or a criminal, neither is a good life for anyone. Twi'leks are known for being emotional and very affectionate to those around them. When this affection is abused though, it can impact a Twi'lek greatly. Not only this, but they are a prideful warrior culture on their homeworld, reminiscent of even the Mandalorians, although not quite as skilled as fighters and have very few resources. But when they are constantly mistreated and sold as lowly slaves by the rest of the galaxy, this inspires great resentment and hatred, a perfect breeding ground for the dark side. There is no being alive that should be seen or treated this way. They are looked on with lascivious eyes or rudely spoken to as they are servants, whether they are free or not. This is a reason that so many male Twi'leks sharpen their teeth. It gives them a more fierce appearance. There is a reason why females will always have their blaster handy to wave in the face of anyone who commits the aforementioned sins around them. But then, there are the forgotten slaves and the street rats who have the potential of the Force deep within, and a galaxy who has done nothing but wrong and abused their people. There is only a single place that would accept such a being with open arms: the Sith. The Sith welcome and embrace this pain. They use it to make them stronger. It is the foundation of their religion, and a foundation and a foothold for the species in the dark side to command unspeakable power. They rise to the top levels of the Sith, achieving the status that is so valued to the rest of their society. What's fascinating is that the Sith are also fully aware of this, and they purposefully exploit the corruption of society to create more powerful Twi'lek dark ladies and lords. The abilities of the Twi'lek are not lost on the Sith, and they see them as the rest of the galaxy refuses to. Lord Kasim's master was also a Twi'lek by the name of Nadaz. Lord Nadaz also frequented Twi'lek slave auctions, looking for an apprentice from his own race. That's where he ended up finding Kasim as a very young boy and purchasing him at auction. Many of their race who are Sith have similar backstories, but there is one Sith that we want to highlight: the Sith Lord Kopess, who was a Jedi before. If anything, the Twi'leks are grateful to the Sith. The dark side gives them the power to fight back against oppression and the stigma surrounding their people. Not every Twi'lek is a noble freedom fighter. Many fight back by rising to the elite caste of society, using their prestige and power to oppress others beneath them. This makes me wonder what life for their people would be like if a Twi'lek Sith were to take over and rule Ryloth. Those who govern it are sadly the ones who keep their people in a state of slavery, and if a Sith were to rule Ryloth, perhaps they wouldn't keep their own in servitude, but utilize their warrior ways to conquer other systems, claiming the resources that they do not naturally produce. But we have to note something. It is highly unlikely that the people of Ryloth would ever accept a Sith ruler. For as many Twi'leks who embrace the dark side, more of them do keep a moral code of peace and a desire for freedom. This is evident with the movements of the Syndulas. The Twi'leks may not lean to the light or dark sides of the Force, but culturally speaking, they are very good people, which makes it all the more unfair that so many are driven towards the Sith by the society of the galaxy. At the end of the day, many of the Twi'leks that embrace the dark side begin as victims, and unfortunately end as conquerors, not liberators. We have to have a look at the ugly side of the galaxy to remember that there is a reason why the power-hungry, death-worshipping cult that is the Sith continues to persist. For some people, the Sith way is the only way out of a life of misery. To a Twi'lek, if they're going to suffer, they may as well use that suffering for power. It's important to remember that the Sith endure because it is made of the desperate, the rejected, and the abused. Those that may have good to offer, but have been spat upon by the galaxy and by life itself. The Twi'leks represent this, and the fact that there are so many of them in the Sith should be a massive red flag that something is wrong. But with that, had you wondered before why there were so many Twi'leks that had joined the Sith Order? And what are your thoughts on this rather tragic aspect of Star Wars lore and the grand mythos? As always, my friends, if you've enjoyed this video and content, reach out and crush that subscribe button. And as always, may the Force be with you, and I hope you're having a phenomenal day.